The day the sky cracked open, Marcus Webb was fixing a broken water pipe in his backyard in Columbus, Ohio. He was 43 years old, broad-shouldered, with grease-stained hands and a coffee mug sitting cold on the porch railing. He had served 12 years in the U.S. Army, done 2 tours in places that never made the news, and come home to raise his daughter alone after his wife, Claire, passed from cancer 3 years ago. He was not a man who scared easily. He was not a man who panicked. But when every screen in every house on his street lit up at the exact same moment, televisions, phones, tablets, car dashboards, all showing the same deep, pulsing blue light, Marcus stood up slowly, wiped his hands on his jeans, and said quietly to himself, HFY, something tells me that pipe is the least of my problems today. The message played in every language simultaneously. It was not aggressive in tone. It was not warm either. It was the way a landlord speaks to a tenant who is already 3 months late on rent. Matter of fact, cold, and completely sure of itself. The voice was smooth, layered, like 3 voices speaking as one. It identified itself as the Caro, the voice of the Galaxy Council, a governing body of 41 alien civilizations that had, apparently, been watching humanity for 230 years. People of Earth, the Caro said, you have reached the threshold of Class 4 civilization. Under Galactic Law, Article 9, Section 12, all Class 4 civilizations must submit a tribute of resources, labor, and intellectual property to the Council every 10 years. Your first tribute is due in 60 days. The required submission includes 200 million tons of refined minerals, 1 billion hours of human cognitive labor annually, and full access to your biological and genetic research archives. Failure to comply will result in corrective action. Then the blue light vanished. Every screen went dark, and the whole world sat in absolute silence for exactly 4 seconds before it exploded into chaos. Governments scrambled. Stock markets collapsed within the hour. 3 presidents called emergency sessions. Religious leaders across the world delivered speeches within minutes. Social media became a wall of noise so loud it was almost physical. People in cities ran into the streets. People in small towns locked their doors. Children asked their parents questions that their parents had no answers for. Marcus Webb stood in his backyard, looked up at the sky, and felt something he had not felt since his first deployment, that specific, electric, dangerous feeling of standing at the edge of something enormous that was about to change everything. He picked up his cold coffee, took a long sip, and walked inside to find his daughter. Lily Webb was 17, sharp-minded, and sitting cross-legged on the couch with her laptop already open and 3 news tabs running. She looked up at her father with wide brown eyes and said, "Dad, did you hear it?" "I heard it," Marcus said. "What does it mean?" Marcus sat down next to her, looked at the screen, and said something that would, months later, become one of the most quoted lines in human history, though at the time it was just a father talking to his daughter in a living room in Ohio. "It means," he said quietly, "that somebody just made a very big mistake thinking we'd say yes." Within 24 hours, every major government on Earth had issued a statement. Most of them were careful, diplomatic, full of phrases like, "We are evaluating the situation, and further dialogue is needed, and we must consider all options." Politicians are, by nature, people who have trained themselves to say many words while committing to nothing, and the arrival of an alien ultimatum was, if anything, the perfect moment for that particular skill. But the people were not careful. In London, 50,000 people marched through the streets holding signs that read, "We are not livestock." In Seoul, university students projected the words "Humanity does not bow" onto the side of government buildings. In Lagos, in Cairo, in Sao Paulo, in Mumbai, in every city on every continent, people poured into public spaces not in fear, but in fury. It was a fury that surprised many world leaders who had assumed the public would be terrified into compliance. They had underestimated something fundamental about human beings, that the moment you tell a human they have no choice, the very first thing they want to do is prove you wrong. Marcus watched all of this from his living room and felt the fury too. But he also felt something else, the trained, quiet part of his soldier's brain that kept asking the same question over and over. What do we actually know about these people? What are their weaknesses? What do they want beyond what they said? He had been contacted that morning by a former commanding officer, General Patricia Holt, now working in a classified government division called the Office of Extraterrestrial Affairs, a department that had apparently existed for 11 years without any public knowledge. "I know you're tired, Marcus," Patricia had said on the phone. Her voice was the same as always, precise, controlled, with that specific weight of someone carrying information they wish they didn't have. "But we need people who think differently. People who've operated in conditions where the rules don't apply. Can you come to Washington?" Marcus had looked at Lily, who was at the kitchen table doing her homework, like the world wasn't ending outside. "Give me 2 hours," he said. He arranged for his neighbor, old Mrs. Calloway, to check in on Lily. He packed a single bag. And before he left, he stood in the doorway of the kitchen and watched his daughter for a moment, her pen moving across paper, her dark hair falling over her shoulder, and he made a silent promise to her that she would never know he made. He drove to the airport and did not look back. In Washington, the situation was organized chaos. The Pentagon had converted 3 floors into a joint task force workspace. Scientists, linguists, military strategists, engineers, diplomats, and intelligence officers were all working in the same building, often in the same rooms, which meant that people who had spent their entire careers talking past each other were now being forced to actually listen. Marcus arrived and was immediately brought to a briefing room where Patricia Holt was standing in front of a screen showing the orbital map of what the scientists were calling the Council Fleet, 17 vessels, each the size of a small city, sitting in a perfect formation just beyond the moon's orbit. "They're not hiding," Patricia said. "They want us to see them. That's deliberate." "It's a pressure tactic," Marcus said, taking a seat. "Show the muscle before the conversation. Make the other side feel small." "Exactly," Patricia said. "And it works on most species, apparently. We've been receiving translated fragments of Council communications. They've done this 47 times in the last 600 years. 47 civilizations have been given this ultimatum." "How many complied?" Marcus asked. Patricia was quiet for just a moment too long. "All of them," she said. The room went still. Marcus leaned back in his chair, looked at the ceiling, and then said, very quietly, very calmly, "SYMJHY. That means we're about to do something nobody in 600 years has managed to do." "That's why you're here," Patricia said. On the 14th day after the first message, the Caro spoke again. This time, it was not a broadcast to the entire planet. It was a direct transmission, a narrow beam communication aimed specifically at the United Nations headquarters in New York, clearly signaling that the Council now expected organized, official dialogue rather than the global chaos of the first 2 weeks. The UN General Assembly Hall had been converted into a secure communications center. The translucent, shimmering image of the Caro's representative appeared above the central podium, a tall, thin figure with 4 arms, skin the color of deep ocean water, and eyes that were completely silver, reflecting the light of the room like mirrors. Its name, as best as human linguists could translate, was Verexol, 3rd Speaker of the Council, a title that apparently placed it somewhere between ambassador and judge. "We have observed your communications," Verexol said through the translation system. "We have noted your emotional responses. We have recorded your public gatherings and political statements. We understand that this process is uncomfortable for young civilizations. It was uncomfortable for all species, initially. But discomfort is not a sufficient reason to refuse the law." The UN Secretary-General, a calm and deeply experienced woman named Dr. Amara Osei, spoke on behalf of Earth. She had prepared carefully. She was respectful, measured, and precise. "We do not refuse dialogue," Dr. Osei said. "We ask for clarification. We ask to understand the legal framework, the basis of Council authority, and whether there exists a formal process by which civilizations may raise objections or seek modifications to the tribute requirements." Verexol tilted its head, a gesture that the behavioral analysts in the monitoring room interpreted as mild amusement. "There is no modification process," it said. "The law is the law. The tribute is not negotiable. The 60-day deadline remains. We have, however, decided to allow a delegation of your people to visit the council station, our primary vessel, for a formal orientation. This is a courtesy extended to new civilizations. It is not an opportunity for negotiation. It is an opportunity for understanding. We accept, Dr. Osei said, without hesitation. When the transmission ended, the room erupted in side conversations. Some diplomats felt this was an opening. Others felt it was a trap. A small group of military advisors in the monitoring room, Marcus among them, were focused on something else entirely. Did you catch it? Marcus said to the young analyst sitting next to him, a woman named Dr. Sofia Reyes, a xenolinguist from MIT who had barely slept in 2 weeks. The pause, Sofia said immediately. When Dr. Osei asked about objections, it paused for 1.3 seconds before it said there was no modification process. That's not a confident pause, Marcus said. No, Sofia agreed, her eyes bright. That's a checking the rules pause. Marcus smiled for the first time in 2 weeks. So there is a process, he said. They just don't want us to find it. Sofia pulled up her notes and said, HFY and HFY, I've been looking at the council's own legal language in the fragments we've translated. There's a phrase that keeps appearing, something that translates roughly to the right of demonstrated equals. I don't know what it means yet, but it's in there. Find out what it means, Marcus said. That phrase might be the most important thing on Earth right now. The delegation that boarded the council shuttle 3 days later was small and deliberately chosen. 5 people designed to represent not power, but breadth of human capability. Dr. Amara Osei led them as the diplomatic voice. Dr. Sofia Reyes came as the language and cultural expert. Dr. James Cho, a 50-year-old Korean-American physicist from Caltech, came as the scientific mind. Colonel Rachel Torres, a decorated Air Force pilot and aerospace engineer, came as the tactical eye. And Marcus Webb came because General Holt had insisted, telling the selection committee simply, he reads rooms better than anyone I've ever met. I don't care that he's not a diplomat. The shuttle ride to the council station took 40 minutes. None of them spoke much. They looked out the viewport at the ship growing larger as they approached, and large was not the right word. It was vast in a way that the human brain was not built to process comfortably. The station was approximately 200 kilometers long, layered in sections of different materials that caught the light differently, studded with structures that might have been weapons, or might have been antennae, or might have been something with no human equivalent. It's designed to make you feel small, Colonel Torres said quietly, echoing Marcus's words from the briefing room. Let them think it's working, Marcus replied. Inside, the station was genuinely extraordinary, and to the credit of every person in that delegation, not one of them allowed their face to show the awe that was flooding through them. The ceilings were 40 feet high. Species from at least a dozen different worlds moved through corridors that were simultaneously beautiful and deeply alien. The air smelled like something between rain and copper. Gravity worked perfectly, which itself was a statement of technological capability. Varric Sol met them personally and led them through what it called the orientation, a 3-hour tour of council history, law, and function, presented in the manner of a museum exhibit, full of carefully curated information that was clearly designed to impress and intimidate in equal measure. Marcus walked quietly, said very little, and watched everything. He noticed the way certain council staff moved faster near specific corridors, avoiding them without appearing to. He noticed a sealed chamber deep in the station's central section that appeared on no map they had been shown. He noticed the way Varric Sol's silver eyes tracked Dr. James Cho with particular attention every time James asked a scientific question, a specific quality of attention, like recognition. And he noticed something in the gallery of what the council called tributary civilizations, the 47 species who had submitted to the tribute. Their images and histories were displayed like trophies. Some had thrived under council membership. Some had grown. But several, and Marcus counted them carefully, several had entries that ended abruptly, with a symbol he didn't recognize. He pulled Sofia close and pointed at the symbol quietly. Sofia looked at it for a long moment and went very still. What? Marcus said. HFY, Sofia whispered. I've seen this symbol in the legal fragments. It means absorbed. It doesn't mean they became members. It means they ceased to exist as independent civilizations. Marcus looked at the symbol again. It appeared next to 9 of the 47 entries. 9 species.
Gone.
Not conquered by war.
Absorbed. Slowly.
Through tribute. Through dependency. Through the gradual legal transfer of resources, knowledge, and labor until there was nothing left that was truly theirs. Marcus straightened up, looked calmly at Varexol, who was explaining something to Dr. Osei 30 feet away, and understood, with absolute, cold clarity, exactly what the Galaxy Council actually was. It was not a governing body. It was a machine for consuming civilizations. And humanity was next on the menu. The delegation returned to Earth, and Marcus went directly to Patricia Holt. He didn't ask for a meeting. He walked into her office, closed the door, and told her everything he had seen and everything Sophia had translated, laying it out with the flat, efficient precision of a soldier's field report. Patricia listened without interrupting. She was quiet for a long time after he finished. 9 civilizations, she said. 9 confirmed from what we could see, Marcus said. There may be more. The gallery wasn't complete. I could tell by the spacing on the walls that sections had been removed or weren't being shown to us. If we submit the first tribute, Patricia said slowly, we begin the process. We become dependent. The tribute increases every cycle. Within 100 years, we wouldn't exist as a free civilization, Marcus finished. We'd be a labor source, a resource mine, a genetic library they own. Patricia stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Washington moved in its ordinary rhythms. Traffic, people, trees just beginning to bud with the early spring. Normal life, completely unaware of what was being discussed 40 floors above it. The problem, she said, is that 31 of our 49 member nations are leaning toward compliance. Their argument is survival, that if we refuse, the Council fleet destroys us, and there's no humanity left to protect. That argument only holds if refusing means war, Marcus said. But I don't think it does. Sophia found the phrase, the right of demonstrated equals. I had her dig all night. It's real. It's in the Council's foundational legal code. Any civilization that can demonstrate equal standing with the Council in 3 specific domains, scientific understanding, strategic capability, and what they call cognitive complexity, cannot be legally compelled to pay tribute. They must be offered membership instead. Patricia turned from the window slowly. Equal standing. Against a council of 41 civilizations. In 3 specific tests, Marcus said. Not against all 41. Against the Council's own benchmarks. They set the bar themselves, centuries ago, when they assumed no young civilization would ever reach it. They underestimated us. They've never met anything like us, Marcus said. Every species they've absorbed or taxed was older than us in one way and younger in another. They developed technology slowly and steadily. They didn't have wars that forced innovation. They didn't have competition that sharpened every field simultaneously. They grew at one pace. He leaned forward. We grew at 10 paces because we had no choice. Our history is brutal and painful and full of things we're not proud of, but every one of those things pushed us forward. Faster. Harder. In more directions at once. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, if we invoke the right of demonstrated equals and fail the tests, the Council will see it as a challenge. The tribute amount could double. Or they could move directly to corrective action. Yes, Marcus said. You understand the risk. I understand that the other road ends in the same place, Marcus said. Just slower. And the slow version is worse, because we won't see it coming until it's too late. Patricia looked at him for a long time. I'll take it to the president, she said. And then to the UN Security Council. Tell them what I told you, Marcus said. All of it. Including the 9 symbols on the wall. Patricia nodded. Then she said quietly, Marcus, if this works. We'll worry about that after it works, he said. Caro, let's move. The vote in the UN General Assembly took 48 hours of debate, argument, fury, and tears. Every ambassador had received the full report. Every nation had been shown the translated legal code, the 9 absorbed civilizations, the full analysis of what tribute compliance actually meant over time. General Holt had authorized the release of everything. No diplomatic softening, no careful framing. Just the raw truth, laid out for every government on Earth to see. Some nations were still afraid. Fear is not irrational when 17 city-sized ships are parked beyond your moon. Several ambassadors argued passionately that the smart move was compliance, that buying time was better than provoking a confrontation, that humanity could find a way to resist from within the system. But the argument that turned the vote came not from a general or a president or a diplomat. It came from Dr. Sofia Reyes, who had been invited to address the assembly and who stood at the podium, looking exhausted, a little underdressed compared to the room around her, and completely unintimidated. "I've spent 3 weeks reading their legal language," Sophia said. "And I want to tell you something about the council that none of their orientation materials mentioned. They are afraid of us. I don't mean they fear us militarily, they don't. Not yet. I mean they are afraid of what we represent. The legal code was written 600 years ago. The right of demonstrated equals has been in their law since the beginning. But in 600 years and 47 civilizations, not one species has ever invoked it. Because every species they encountered either didn't know it existed, or was too broken by the pressure of the ultimatum to try." She paused and let that settle. "We are the first species to find the clause. We are the first species to understand it before the deadline. And we have 41 days left." They did not expect this. Their pauses, their word choices, the way their representative watched us during the orientation, they are recalculating. They thought we would be like the others. We are not like the others. She looked out at the assembly and said, "Ab SYMJHY, I genuinely believe, that we are the first civilization they have encountered that was born ready for this moment. Not because we are perfect, not because our history is clean, but because everything we have survived made us exactly what we need to be right now." The vote, when it came, was 163 nations in favor of invoking the right of demonstrated equals and 31 abstaining. 0 nations voted for compliance.
0.
When Dr. Osei transmitted the formal declaration to the Council fleet, the Caro went silent for 11 hours. When Verixol finally responded, the 1.3-second pause was back, longer this time, closer to 3 seconds. "The Council acknowledges your invocation," it said. "Under Article 14 of the Foundational Code, the right of demonstrated equals requires formal testing. The tests will be administered in 30 days. The tribute deadline is suspended pending results." Then it said something that had never been said in 600 years of this process. "We will prepare accordingly." In the monitoring room, Marcus heard those words and felt something move through his chest, quiet, fierce, and warm. They were surprised.
Good.
30 days. 3 tests. All of civilization on the line. The Council transmitted the testing parameters within 24 hours of the declaration, detailed, precise, written in their legal language which Sophia and her expanded team of 40 linguists worked through the night to fully translate. The first test was called the Demonstration of Universal Comprehension, a scientific assessment in which humanity would be required to answer questions generated by the Council's own scientific archive, covering fields from quantum mechanics to biological complexity to cosmological modeling. The answers would be evaluated not just for accuracy, but for originality of approach. The second test was called the Demonstration of Strategic Clarity, a simulated scenario in which humanity's military and strategic minds would be given a complex, multivariable conflict situation and evaluated on their decision-making process, their ability to find non-obvious solutions, and their capacity for what the Council's language called adaptive reasoning under existential pressure. The third test was the one that had no direct translation. The Council's word for it was something Sophia kept rendering different ways each time she tried, before finally settling on the demonstration of irreducible identity, which she explained to Marcus as, "They want to know if you know who you are. If you have something in your core that cannot be taken, bought, or broken." Most civilizations, under pressure, fracture. They lose their center. The Council wants to see if we have one. "How do you test for that?" Marcus asked. I don't know yet, Sophia said. But I think it might be the most important one. The next 30 days were unlike anything in human history. Scientists from every nation formed joint working groups that operated around the clock, sharing research that had previously been classified, competing not against each other, but against the Council's benchmarks. Physicists who had spent their careers dismissing each other's theories were suddenly in the same rooms, building on each other's work. The scientific output was extraordinary. Problems that had been stuck for decades moved because the pressure and the collaboration collided in exactly the right way. For the strategic test, the military and intelligence communities of 30 nations ran simulations together. Marcus led one of the key planning teams, and what he found, working with generals and strategists from countries that had been adversaries for generations, was that the diversity of human strategic thinking was itself the advantage. No single military tradition could solve the scenarios alone. But 5 traditions working together, each bringing a different way of seeing the same problem, could find solutions that no single approach ever would. He wrote in his report, "The Council has never seen a civilization that thinks in this many directions simultaneously. Our disagreements are not weaknesses. Our disagreements are the mechanism by which we find things that a unified, singular way of thinking would miss completely." And the third test, the demonstration of irreducible identity. Sophia came to Marcus on the 22nd day with dark circles under her eyes and a look on her face that he had learned to associate with something important. "I figured it out," she said. "The third test isn't a question or a simulation. The Council is going to present us with an offer. A genuine offer, something valuable, something tempting, and they're going to watch how we respond. Whether we protect who we are, or whether we trade it for something that looks better." "What kind of offer?" Marcus asked. "I think," Sophia said slowly, "they're going to offer to make it all go away. No tests. No tribute. Full membership. Protection. Resources. Everything humanity thinks it wants, in exchange for something that sounds small but isn't." "What's the thing that sounds small?" Marcus asked. Sophia looked at him. "Caro," she said, using the word for the first time not as a title but as a concept, "the right to define ourselves. They'll ask us to let the Council determine the official classification, history, and future development path of the human species." Sounds administrative. It's actually everything. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "HFY and HFY, we need to make sure every person involved in that test room understands exactly what they're being offered, because it will be wrapped in the most beautiful packaging they've ever seen." On the morning of the 30th day, the delegation boarded the shuttle again. This time, the world watched. Every screen on Earth carried the live broadcast of the shuttle launch, not as panic or chaos, but as something that felt, impossibly, like a communal held breath. Schools canceled classes. Offices emptied. Families gathered around screens in living rooms and restaurants and public squares. A planet of 8 billion people all looking in the same direction at the same moment. Lily Webb watched from their living room in Columbus, alone, with Mrs. Calloway sitting next to her holding her hand. Marcus had called the night before. He had been careful with his words, careful in the way that people are careful when they know they might not speak again. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he had said, "I need you to know that everything I've done has been for you. For every Lily on this planet." Lily had been quiet for a moment and then said, "Dad, come home." "That's the plan," he said. The Council station received them formally. The testing chambers were separate rooms, prepared specifically for this, which itself was remarkable. They had rebuilt parts of their station to accommodate these tests, which confirmed what Sophia had said. They were preparing. They were not treating this casually. The first test, Universal Comprehension, was administered to a team of 23 scientists who had been selected from thousands of candidates worldwide. Dr. James Cho led the team. They were given 6 hours and a series of problems that the Council's own analysts had designed to be unsolvable without a minimum of 400 years of continuous scientific development. Humanity had 300 years of documented modern science, but it had also had wars, industrial revolutions, space races, medical crises that forced biological science forward in decades instead of centuries, climate pressure that pushed energy research faster than any peaceful development would have allowed. And, crucially, the internet, a tool for collective intelligence that no other species in the Council's history had developed because no other species had needed it. James Cho's team didn't just answer the questions. They answered them in ways the Council had not seen before, approaching several problems from angles that the Council's own framework hadn't considered, producing answers that were correct but arrived at through reasoning paths that the evaluation system initially flagged as errors before deeper analysis confirmed them as valid alternative solutions. The Council evaluators called for a 90-minute recess after the third hour. That had never happened before. The second test, strategic clarity, was Marcus's domain. He led a team of 12 strategists into a chamber where they were presented with a scenario, a three-way conflict between three fictional civilizations with asymmetric capabilities, involving resource competition, historical grievance, and an external threat that could either unite or destroy all three parties, depending on how it was handled. The Council expected standard military analysis, resource calculation, force projection, threat elimination. Marcus's team produced something different. They produced a solution that used the external threat as a bridge, not to force alliance, but to create a shared problem that allowed all three civilizations to demonstrate value to each other without surrendering advantage. It preserved pride. It created interdependence without domination. It was slower than a military solution and more expensive in the short term, but it produced a stable outcome that the military solution never could have. The key insight, the one Marcus had contributed, was written in the report this way: the goal is not to win the conflict. The goal is to make the conflict unnecessary. A civilization that can consistently make conflicts unnecessary is more strategically capable than one that can consistently win them. When the evaluation results came back for both tests, Verixol entered the testing facility personally, something that, the Council staff's body language made very clear, was not standard procedure. It looked at the human delegation for a long moment with those silver mirror eyes. 2 of 3 tests, it said, show results consistent with demonstrated equal status. Then its voice shifted, just slightly, just enough for Sophia to catch it. The third test will begin in 1 hour. The third chamber was different from the others. There were no screens, no panels of evaluators behind glass, no technical equipment. It was simply a large, quiet room with a curved ceiling that showed a live image of the galaxy, stars and nebulae and the vast, indifferent dark between them, and a single table with chairs on both sides. Verixol sat across from the human delegation alone. No aides, no staff. I will speak plainly, it said, which itself was something new. The formal council language had always been precisely structured, never conversational. You have performed exceptionally in the first 2 tests. You have surpassed the historical record of every civilization that has reached this stage. In the interest of honest dialogue, I will tell you that there are voices within the council who believe you should be offered immediate full membership regardless of the third test's outcome. Dr. Osei said carefully, "We are honored by." "I am not finished," Verixol said, not unkindly. "There are also voices who believe that a civilization as unpredictable as yours represents a structural risk to the council's stability. A species that thinks in too many directions, that does not follow expected development paths, that does not respond to pressure the way civilizations are supposed to respond." The room was very quiet. "The offer I am making," Verixol said, "is this. Full council membership. Immediate. No tribute. Complete protection under the council's military framework. Access to the combined scientific knowledge of 41 civilizations. Trading rights across the entire mapped galaxy. And in exchange, the council will assume administrative oversight of Earth's development classification. Your species' official history, as recorded in council archives, will be written by council historians. Your future development will be guided by council advisors. You will remain yourselves in every practical sense, but the definition of what you are and what you are becoming will be held by us." He placed a document on the table, translated into every major human language. "This is the most generous offer the council has made to any civilization in its history," Verixol said. And then, almost gently, You have children on your planet who are afraid. You have a world that has been living in fear for 30 days. This sends all of that, today. Nobody spoke. Marcus looked at the document on the table. He looked at the stars on the ceiling. He thought of Lily. He thought of her doing homework at the kitchen table while the world fell apart outside. He thought of every ordinary person on Earth who just wanted the fear to end. He understood, in that moment, why 47 civilizations had said yes to things like this. Because the offer was beautiful.
And it was real.
And it would work right up until the moment it didn't, and by then it would be too late to take back. Dr. Osei looked at Marcus. Sophia looked at Marcus. James looked at Marcus. Colonel Torres looked at Marcus. He wasn't the leader of the delegation. He had no official authority. But he was the one who spoke. He leaned forward, looked directly at Verexol's silver eyes, and said in a quiet, level voice, HFY, I want to be very honest with you. That offer is extraordinary. And we understand completely that you mean it in the most favorable way you can. But you asked us to demonstrate irreducible identity. So let me show you what that means for us. He did not raise his voice. He did not perform. We define ourselves, he said. Our history, everything in it, the good and the terrible, belongs to us. Our future belongs to us. Not because we are perfect, not because we have earned it by being great, but because the moment a people let someone else hold the story of who they are, they begin to disappear. We have watched 9 civilizations disappear through your system, and I do not believe all 9 of them understood what they were agreeing to when they signed.
We do understand it.
And our answer is no. He pushed the document gently back across the table. We will take equal membership, he said. Or, we will take nothing and find our own way. But we will not trade the thing that makes us us, not for any price you can offer. Verexol looked at him for a very long time. Then, and this was the moment that Sophia would describe in her memoir as the most extraordinary thing she ever witnessed in her life, the 4-armed, ocean-skinned, silver-eyed representative of the most powerful governing body in the known galaxy did something that its species apparently did only very, very rarely. It smiled. The smile was not warm in the human sense. It was structural, a specific arrangement of the facial muscles around Verexol's thin mouth that the behavioral analysts would later describe as the Keth expression of profound surprise, a reaction reserved, in that species' culture, for moments that genuinely could not have been anticipated. It lasted only a moment. Then Verexol composed itself and said, "The 3rd test is complete." It stood. "I must consult with the full council," it said. "You will have a response by tomorrow morning. You are welcome to remain on the station as guests, not as subjects, not as petitioners, as guests." The distinction in its word choice was not lost on anyone in the room. When Verexol left, the human delegation sat in silence for a moment. Then Colonel Torres exhaled a long, slow breath and said, "Did we just pass?" "I don't know," Sophia said honestly. "But I genuinely think, that was the right answer regardless of what they decide." Marcus stood up and walked to the curved wall where the stars were displayed. He stood there quietly, looking at the galaxy. James Cho came and stood beside him. 41 civilizations, James said. And we're the first to say no. "We're the first to mean it," Marcus said. They were given comfortable quarters for the night, another first according to the station staff, who showed them to the rooms with a specific energy that felt, despite the alien context, remarkably like nervousness. Marcus did not sleep. He sat by the viewport and watched Earth from the station's orbit, a blue and white sphere hanging in the dark, ordinary and extraordinary at the same time, full of 8 billion people who had no idea that a man from Columbus, Ohio was sitting in an alien spacecraft looking at their home and thinking about a water pipe in a backyard and a cold cup of coffee. He thought about Claire, his wife, Lily's mother, who had loved stories about space, who had always said that the universe was too big to be empty and too beautiful to be indifferent. He talked to her sometimes still, quietly, in private moments. He talked to her now. "I think I did the right thing," he said to the dark. "I think you would have liked Sophia. I think you would have found James funny. I think you would have looked at this planet out this window and cried the good kind of tears." He put his hand on the cold glass. SYMJHY, he said softly. I think we're going to be okay. In the morning, Verixol summoned them back to the central chamber. The full council was present, not physically, but projected, 41 representatives from 41 civilizations filling the enormous chamber in shimmering, life-size holograms, a gathering that had apparently not convened in full session in over 80 years. The weight of it, the sheer accumulated age and power in that room, was something that all 5 humans felt physically, like pressure in the chest. Dr. Osei stood very straight. Marcus stood next to her and kept his hands loose at his sides, a habit from his military days, a way of staying ready without looking tense. Verixol spoke for the council. In 412 years of testing civilizations under Article 9, it said, no species has ever achieved passing scores on all 3 demonstrations. You are the first. The chamber was absolutely silent. Under Article 14, Section 7 of the Foundational Code, humanity is hereby recognized as demonstrated equals of the Galaxy Council. The tribute requirement is formally and permanently withdrawn. Earth is offered full sovereign membership in the Council with all rights, protections, and privileges that membership entails, with no conditions and no administrative oversight beyond what any member civilization accepts voluntarily. It paused. We would also like to formally acknowledge that your 3rd test response has prompted an internal council review of our tribute process and the status of 7 civilizations currently under tributary obligation. This review was requested by 14 member states who have been waiting for an appropriate moment to raise it for some time. That last sentence landed quietly, but Sophia grabbed Marcus's arm when she heard it, because what it meant was enormous. What it meant was that there were voices inside the council itself who had been waiting, who had been hoping, who had needed someone to do exactly what humanity had just done. They were not alone in this. They had never been alone. The transmission back to Earth was broadcast live. Marcus stood at the back of the communication chamber as Dr. Osei delivered the news, calm, clear, and complete, to every screen on the planet simultaneously. He watched the feed from Earth while she spoke. He watched Times Square, where people were standing in the cold looking up at screens and then, as the words registered, turning to strangers and grabbing them. He watched a square in Tokyo where people stood in perfect stillness and then slowly, quietly, began to weep. He watched Lagos, where someone had set up speakers, and the moment Dr. Osei finished speaking, music started, and within 60 seconds, people were dancing. He watched a farm in rural Kansas where an old man sat alone on a porch step and looked up at the sky and took his hat off, slowly, and held it to his chest. He watched Lily. Someone at the task force in Washington had set up a secondary feed, private, just for him, showing his house in Columbus. Mrs. Calloway was there, and 4 of Lily's friends, and the neighbor from 2 doors down who had never spoken to Marcus in 4 years. When the news landed, Lily put her face in her hands. Just for a moment. Then she looked up, and even through the low-quality feed, Marcus could see her expression, the specific combination of relief and pride and love that a child wears when a parent does something that makes them feel safe. He had to look away from the screen for a moment. Colonel Torres appeared at his side. You okay? Yeah, Marcus said. He stopped. Cleared his throat.
Yeah.
I'm good. The return journey to Earth was scheduled for the following morning. The council had offered a formal welcome ceremony, and Dr. Osei had accepted with appropriate grace and warmth, because they were members now, and membership required relationship, and relationship required showing up even when you were exhausted and wanted to go home. But that evening, in the hours before the ceremony, something happened that Marcus had not expected. Verixol found him alone in one of the station's observation corridors, a long hallway with a transparent outer wall, looking into space. They stood side by side for a moment without speaking, which felt surprisingly natural, given everything. I want to ask you something personal, Verixol said. Go ahead, Marcus said. When I made the offer, the administrative oversight offer, I watched your face. You understood what it would cost. You had a daughter at home. You had a planet of frightened people. You knew the offer was real.
It paused.
What made you say no? Marcus thought about it for a moment. Not because he didn't know the answer. He knew it immediately. He thought about it because he wanted to say it right. My daughter's mother died 3 years ago, he said. She was the one who always knew who we were as a family. She held the story of us. After she was gone, I spent a long time being afraid that without her, we'd lose the shape of ourselves. That Lily and I would just become two people living in the same house instead of a family. He was quiet for a moment. We didn't, because the story was in us too, both of us, not just in her. She had given it to us by living it with us. And when I was sitting in that room looking at your offer, I thought, this is the same choice. The story of humanity is in every one of us. You can't hold it separately from the people who live it. The moment you let someone else hold it, you've already started to disappear. Varric's soul was quiet for a long time. Caro, it said finally, using the word not as a title but as a statement, I have served the Council for 140 years. You are the first being from any species who has ever explained that to me in a way that I understood. Marcus looked at it. HFY, he said quietly. I think your council needed to hear it as much as we needed to say it. Varric's soul looked at him with those silver eyes that reflected the stars. Perhaps, it said. Marcus Webb came home on a Tuesday morning in April. The world had changed. Not in an explosive, visible way. The cities were still standing, the traffic still moved, schools were back in session, the water pipes in Columbus still needed fixing. But underneath all of it, something fundamental had shifted. The planet felt different in the way that a person feels different after they have faced the worst possible thing and found out they could handle it, quieter somehow and more solid. There was no parade for Marcus. He hadn't wanted one, and when General Holt had mentioned the possibility, he had said with complete sincerity that a parade would make him feel like running in the opposite direction. A small press conference at the Pentagon. A handshake from the president. A speech he kept short because he had never been good at speeches and because everything important had already been said. He drove himself home from the airport. The house was the same white siding, the same porch with the same railing where he had left his coffee mug an eternity ago. The yard was a little overgrown, which he noted professionally, and filed away for the weekend. Lily was waiting on the porch. She had grown, he thought, and then realized that was impossible. It had only been 5 weeks, and then realized it wasn't impossible at all because growing isn't always physical. She walked down the steps when she saw his car, and when he got out she crossed the yard and put her arms around him without saying anything, and he held her for a long time on the lawn in the April morning while the neighborhood went about its ordinary, beautiful, irreplaceable life around them. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet, and she looked at him with that direct, unvarnished look she had inherited from her mother. Tell me everything, she said. I will, he said. But first, is there coffee? I've been thinking about coffee for 5 weeks. She laughed. Actually laughed. The full, genuine kind that had been rare for 3 years and was, he felt, one of the best sounds in the known galaxy. They went inside. In the months that followed, humanity's integration into the council proceeded slowly and carefully, the way a person who has learned to be cautious proceeds, with curiosity and principle and a specific refusal to be rushed or dazzled. Dr. Sophia Reyes led the team that drafted Earth's membership terms, working directly with council legal scholars to ensure that every clause protected human sovereignty, human identity, and humanity's right to define its own development path. It was painstaking work. It took 8 months. Sophia described it later as the most exhausting and the most important thing I have ever done, and I would do it again without a single moment of hesitation. Dr. James Cho joined an intercivilizational scientific council and spent his first year there cheerfully and systematically dismantling 3 centuries of accepted cosmological theory that the council had treated as settled, a process that made him extremely unpopular with a specific group of very old alien scientists and extremely popular with the younger generation of researchers across 37 species who had been privately doubting those theories for years. Colonel Rachel Torres became Earth's first liaison officer to the Council's defense coordination body and spent her first meeting rewriting their entire strategic simulation framework, which she described to Marcus as roughly equivalent to replacing a horse cart with a jet engine. Politely, of course. And Marcus Webb went home. He fixed the water pipe.
He mowed the yard.
He drove Lily to her college visits and sat in the back of auditorium rooms while admissions officers gave presentations and thought, with genuine, private amusement, that everything felt appropriately, wonderfully small after everything that had happened. One evening in November, he was sitting on the porch with his coffee, hot this time, and Lily came out and sat next to him, and they looked up at the sky the way they sometimes did, in the comfortable silence that had grown between them over the years. After a while, Lily said, "Do you think they'll come back?" "The council? We're members now," Marcus said. "So yes, just differently." "Are you scared?" Marcus thought about that honestly.
"No," he said.
"Not anymore. Are you?" Lily was quiet for a moment.
"No," she said.
And the way she said it, calm, grounded, certain, sounded exactly like her mother. They sat together in the dark, father and daughter, under a sky that was now bigger and fuller and more full of neighbors than it had ever been, and the stars above Columbus, Ohio burned exactly the way they always had, ancient and indifferent and absolutely, breathtakingly beautiful. Somewhere beyond the moon, a civilization of 41 species was beginning, very slowly, to change. And somewhere in a database in the Council's legal archive, an entry had been written that would stand for as long as the Council stood. Humanity Class 4 Civilization Soul System. Status: Demonstrated equals. Tribute requirement: withdrawn permanently. Notable: first civilization in Council history to invoke, attempt, and pass all 3 demonstrations of the right of demonstrated equals. Notable further: first civilization in Council history to decline administrative integration while accepting full membership. Internal Council review of tributary processes initiated following this civilization's admittance. Recommendation for future contact protocols: approach as equals. Do not assume compliance. Do not underestimate emotional coherence as a strategic variable. Assessment note, filed by third speaker Varexol. This species is unlike anything in the record. They carry their history like a wound and a weapon simultaneously. They build things and break them and build better. They argue with each other endlessly and stand together when it counts. They are, by any measurable standard, the most inconvenient civilization the Council has ever encountered. They are also, I believe, exactly what the Council has needed for 400 years. Handle accordingly. White medium star the end, white medium star.